like to talk to you about dreams. There's nothing wrong with dreaming. And I know a person called Satish Kumar, who was the founder of a wonderful sustainable college in southern England, and he said, you know, everything starts with a dream. And if you have a dream that's bigger than yourself, it'll take you where you're supposed to be going. And we hear Cameron talk about acting to immediate needs. That's important. And Coralie talking about filling the gaps. But there's also something that talks about the long term, a long-term dream. And I got to know that you want to create a sustainable city, an eco-city. And I decided to talk a little bit about that and show you some of the dreams some people have dreamt, big dreams, small dreams. Some have been successful, some not so successful. And the bad news, or the good news, is that there is no such thing as a sustainable city. Not as yet. Perhaps Christchurch might be the first one. But what is true is that many people have dreamt about it. Dreamt about creating utopia for themselves in their own regions. This is an example of a dream in Dubai by Timelinks, an environmental design company there. Won an award many years ago for the design of creating a contemporary pyramid, which is totally self-sufficient, sustainable, and it would house 1 million people. The artist Guenda, Chinese artist, model for a sustainable city for China, he believes that gardens are really important, green spaces. But he also believes that it's really important to take the point of view of the Chinese tradition. And so the center of the garden, as you can see, he has actually created calligraphic characters, which he feels are really important in the Chinese culture, Chinese tradition. These are some young students from India who are developing vertical cities, but they're not just normal vertical cities, they are farming cities. So the different units you can see are interchangeable, but the main aspect is that it becomes a vertical farming city. This is a Spanish architect, Luis de Garrido, who has created kind of a gem or precious stone-like city in the Basque region in Spain. And he wanted to create these gem-like units because he feels that the Basque people are the precious stones of Spain. So you can also create some more politically orientated cities. And then there's creating new cities. One thing is to create a plan for a city on the drawing board and have this vision, this dream of what it could be like. Another thing is to actually go out there and see, can you create a new city from scratch? And I'm going to show you a couple of very grand visions. One that worked and one that didn't. Or at least I don't know whether this one is working, but there's an attempt to do it. The Masdar Eco-City in Abu Dhabi is being created as we speak. And it's the government of Abu Dhabi creating it, and the Foster's partners in London designing it. It's going to be, I think, probably the most resource-intensive, expensive city ever. But it's going to be built for 50,000 people, totally self-sufficient, carbon-free, 100% recyclable natural energy systems, waste systems, and the transportation. There are going to be no cars, but these little electric vehicles freighting people about. The Fosters are very inspired by the fact that they are actually entertaining both ancient technologies combined with the state-of-the-art technology to create this city. To keep out the heat and to avoid air conditioning, for example, they're closing the city in behind the walls and creating very narrow streets and using the shadow to cool the spaces. Now, it was supposed to have been finished in 2016. Now the prognosis is 2020 to 2025, and the cost of that city is estimated as $22 billion. It's a very interesting undertaking that a country, oil-producing country, is actually creating a carbon-free city. So perhaps there is something about after peak oil, don't know. But it's a very grand vision, and it's happening, so let's see. Dongtang, in 2006, I was director of Schumacher College in England, which is a sustainable college dealing with all aspects of sustainability, from political issues to environmental issues to sociology, anthropology, spiritual issues. And I'd say to the team of people who are going to develop the ideas of Christchurch, if you have an opportunity, I'd highly recommend that you actually go to the Schumacher College and spend a little time there, because to most of us, sustainability is out there. It's a kind of a theory, a concept. But when you go to Schumacher College, you get it under your skin. It actually, when you leave, it's in your heart, and you can never look back. And so some of the engineers, Arab, working with the government in China, in Shanghai, on developing the Dongtang eco-city. They had been to Schumacher College, and I spoke to some of the directors. They were very excited about this project. And this was again in 2006. It was going to be the first eco-city in the world. And again, for 50,000 people on an island outside of Shanghai, using a lot of green spaces, public footpaths, cycle paths, garden spaces for the public. And what was very exciting for them was the fact that the Chinese actually wanted to start this city with a historic monument, respecting the city, respecting the history of the place, letting that be the heart, and then the city was unfolding around it. The plans have been stopped. They were stopped during the recession. I think economic issues, political issues, we don't know, but the idea was grand. And I think, you know, we have to pursue our ideas. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they succeed, but if we don't go with our ideas or our visions or our dreams, you know, we'll never get anywhere. The other thing is redesigning existing cities. Many also dreams have been implemented to create this. For example, Curitiba in Brazil is one of the most famous city. The mayor and the former mayor and urban planner, Jamie Lerner, who by the way has done a TED talk, so if you're interested you should listen to it. He's a very great guy to listen to. He says cities are not the problem, they are the solution. And he actually already in the 60s decided to implement sustainability initiatives in Curitiba. And so there's something like 14 forests and 16 parks, and the public transportation systems are very much state-of-the-art, and 2/3 of the population are actually using these systems. And Curitiba carries on developing their sustainability infrastructure. The same with Seattle. The mayor of Seattle in 2005 created a climate change protection policy, which he actually got 1,000 mayors throughout the US to sign. And Seattle has actually been leading the way in the US in terms of developing sustainability in the cities. A local project, Malmö, just across the straits from Copenhagen. It's a development that's been in existence for about 10, 12 years. I've been there several times and spoken to the local residents, and they love the place. It's 100% local-based renewable energy systems, both solar power and wind power. It is a multi-purpose development so that elderly people, people with children, young couples can live side by side, and it's very mixed, and it's a very wonderful place to be. I mean, the place was created years ago, so they now have had some experience as to how it works. Some of the things work better than others, but in general, people love staying there and talk about sort of economic, how to also create an economic, stable place. Because people love being there and love living there, the house prices are actually quite high, so they haven't gone down during the time of recession. So if you create a city where people like to be, you're very far advanced. So what kind of processes do you then undertake to be able to create your dreams? There are a variety of processes, and as you start your move towards recreating Christchurch, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of attempts and a lot of experiences, a lot of failures and successes that you can learn from. And then you can decide what you want to do for Christchurch. Forum for the Future in London have created a kind of a guide, a toolkit for stakeholders in redevelopment of cities. It's for the government, for civil society, for planners, for architects to use. You can download it, it's a PDF file. Copenhagen, Agenda for Sustainable Cities, 10 Principles, Rediscover the City, Redefine City Value, Involve Everyday Experts, Break Down Silos, Redistribute Urban Decision Making, Redesign Urban Planning, Promote Urban Responsibility, Go Global, Raise Chaos, Crisis and Change, and Encourage Passion Urban Leadership. They are missing one thing, which is engaging the citizens. But they haven't got that because that's part of our DNA in Scandinavian countries. We always engage our citizens whenever we do design or architecture. So you will very rarely find anything built that is not built in kind of co-creation with the people who are going to be using places. This is my favorite example. This is Totnes in Devon, where I talked about being the director of the Schumacher College. In 2006, I was there, and a young entrepreneur, pioneer, introduced Totnes citizens, I suppose we were about 300 or 400 people together, to the idea of peak oil, the idea that there may not be fossil fuels one day, and the idea that cities ought to start building resilience. What happens if you can no longer transport your food? What happens if you can no longer reconnect with the rest of your country? He created a transition network, and today I think there's about 400 cities in the world part of this particular network. And it's all about localization, it's all about resilience. How do you build resilience? So out of the 500 people who were there, they divided into groups. There was a transportation group, the energy group, the educational group, the health group, and they have been working since 2006 on redevelopment of Totnes. And recently, Totnes actually is now producing 60% of their own food produce locally. Which means I think Totnes will probably be the first city in the world that are ousting supermarkets and hypermarkets and all the bland food that has been exported around the world to all of us. And they're recreating and regenerating their local shops and their local markets. And it's not just the citizens through allotments in the town, it is also the surrounding estates that are actually engaging in this. So I think this is a wonderful example of what actually can happen within a very short period of time, if you want to, and if you work together. So Christchurch, what about you? I look forward to coming back in a few years' time and say, well, I can use your example in my talk as the first sustainable city. There are a couple of things I think, personal point of view, that you have to remember. Two things specifically. I see cities as living entities, almost like human beings with a soul, a heart, a mind, and a body. And listening to the previous speakers and speaking to so many people since I came 24 hours ago, you have a soul. You have this ancient soul combined with a more contemporary history. And it's deeply embedded in this particular place and in New Zealand as such. And you have to respect that, regardless of what you do, because if you work from your soul, you can never go wrong. You have the heart. 300,000 people's hearts have been touched in what happened recently. And I think, you also have to respect that, the emotions of this place. The mind, again, you have the resource. And when I talk about mind, I also mean all the infrastructure systems that you're going to be put in place that are all interrelated and interlinked. And you have to recreate the body, and that's your challenge. And I think that if you do that, and think also about the resilience of Christchurch, because the future isn't going to be easy. You may, who knows whether you will have any more earthquakes. What about climate change? The latest statistics says that the sea level rise is going to be 1.30 meters this century. Christchurch is a very low-lying area. What are you going to do about that? What about the extreme climatic changes that are happening? What happens with drought? What about floods? What happens if we reach peak oil? Are you going to be self-sufficient in food? I think it's really important, whilst you do the short-term and the temporary measures, that you think long-term, because you want this city to carry on as it was created many, many years ago. You want a Christchurch that's going to survive and in the future. And so you need to take all these elements to heart and on board when you start your planning for the future. So, Christchurch, good luck. Thank you.